Good evening. Welcome to the Fright Files. My name is Chris Harmon, but tonight you can call me Dr. Fright. Today we will take a look at 4 haunting tales of missing individuals, weird places of the unknown. But before we begin, I need you to ask yourself one question. Can you survive till the end? Let's begin, shall we? I call this first tale The Silent Circus. Every year, without warning or fanfare, a mysterious circus would appear on the outskirts of a small town in Eldridge. The townspeople never saw it arrive. It was just there, suddenly. One morning, the field that lay barren and empty the night before would be filled with tents of all shapes and sizes. Towering rides that reached towards the sky, and a Ferris wheel that turned slowly and silently in the misty dawn. The circus was away. The circus was always shrouded in an eerie silence. No music, no laughter, no circus barkers calling out to entice the visitors. Yet, despite its unsettling atmosphere, the people of the Eldridge felt an irresistible pull to the strange and silent fair. You see, Jordan was a boy who often felt invisible in his own life. At school, he was just another face in the crowd, his presence unnoticed by both teachers and classmates alike. At home, his parents were too busy with their own work, their own lives, to pay him much attention. He spent most of his time alone, wandering the town streets, trying to and escaping into the pages of the books he loved. When the silent circus appeared on the outskirts of town one foggy night, Jordan felt the same pull, that some unplainable urge to see what the secrets the circus held. The fog was thick as he made his way into the field, its damp tendrils curling around him like ghostly fingers. The circus loomed before him, its tents stretching into the mist, the rides moving soundlessly as operated by unseen hands. There were no lights, no signs of life, but Jordan was not afraid. He was too intrigued by the circus's strange, otherworldly presence to be afraid. As he wandered through the circus grounds, Jordan noticed the attractions were unlike any he'd ever seen before. There were no traditional games or rides. Instead, the booths and tents seemed to offer something more personal, something darker. He passed by a mirror maze, its glass surfaces wrapped around clouds, showing reflections that didn't quite match his movements. There was a game where the prizes were not stuffed animals or toys, but objects that looked oddly familiar, belongings of the people of Eldridge, lost items that had vanished without a trace. And then there were the rides, the mechanisms hidden, the carts and swings moving with an unnatural smoothness, as if powered by some individual, invisible force. Despite the eerie atmosphere, Jordan felt a strange sense of belonging. The circus seemed to know him, to understand the loneliness that he had been hidden, seemed to understand the loneliness that had been his constant companion. It was as if the circus had been waiting for him, drawing him in with a promise of something that he couldn't quite name. As he walked deeper into the circus, Jordan noticed a small, tattered tent set apart from the rest. A sign hung above the entrance, its letters faded and barely legible. Fortunes told, fortunes told that the tent seemed out of place, old and warm, with a sense of decay. The constant sharply, the constant sharply with the pristine, if silent, splendor of the rest of the circus. Yet, as Jordan approached, the flap of the tent rustled, and he felt a beckoning pull, urging him to step inside. Jordan hesitated for a moment before pushing aside the flap and entering the dimly lit space. Inside, the air was thick with a sense of incense, and the light from a single flickering candle cast long shadows on the walls. At the center of the tent sat a woman, her face obscured by a hood, her hands resting on a small round table draped in a faded velvet cloth, her fingers long and thin, were adorned with rings that caught the candlelight, glinting like tiny troopers' stars. Jordan swallowed hard, suddenly unsure of why he had to come. The woman lifted her head slightly, revealing just a glimpse of her face, a sharp chin, pale lips, and eyes that glowed with an unnatural light. She gestured for him to sit. Come sit down. And though every instinct told him to run, Jordan found himself compelled to stay, compelled to obey. Welcome, Jordan. Welcome, my son. The woman said, her voice soft and melodic, yet tingled with something cold and distant. I've been expecting you. Jordan's breath caught in his throat. How did she know his name? Who? Who are you? He asked, his voice trembling. The woman leaned forward, her eyes locked onto his. I am the keeper of the silent circus. The guardian of its secrets and the bearer of its curse. Curse! Jordan slammed his mirror, mourning. The fortune teller nodded slowly. This circus is not what it seems. Jordan thought for a second. Yes, this circus is not what it seems. It is a trap, a place where the souls of the lost and forgotten are collected. Each attraction is designed to ensure a different type of person, feeding on their fears and desires until they are consumed. The circus takes what it wants and it never lets go. Jordan's heart pounded in his chest. He had heard stories about people who had gone missing after visiting the silent circus, but he had never believed them until now. Why are you telling me this? Jordan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Because, the woman said, her voice growing softer and more sorrowful. I am a prisoner of this place, bound to the circus until I can find someone to take my place. I have been here for longer than I can remember, trapped in a cycle that never ends, that never ends, that never ends. And now, Jordan, the circus has chosen you, said the woman. The circus has chosen you. You! Jordan's blood ran cold. He wanted to run, to escape the nightmare. But he could feel the circus pulling, tightening around him, binding him into this place. There must be a way out, he pleaded. I don't want to be trapped here. The fortune teller's eyes darkened and slightly. She sighed heavily. There is a way. There is a way, she said, but it comes at a cost. You can take my place, become the new guardian of the circus, and I will be free. But if you choose to leave, the circus will consume your body. The circus will consume your soul. Your body and your soul will be consumed by the circus, and you will become part of it forever. Jordan's mind raced. He could feel the circus closing in on him, its silent attractions coming to life, their unseen mechanisms whirling and clicking as they prepared to ensnare him. He had to choose, and quickly. The fortune teller's gaze bored into him, her eyes pleading. Please, Jordan, she whispered. I have to. I have been here for so long. I don't want to be here anymore. Let me go. Let me go. Let me go. Let me go. The weight of the decision crushed him, but he knew what he had to do. He couldn't leave here. He couldn't leave here. He couldn't remain trapped for eternity in this nightmare. He couldn't. He couldn't. He couldn't. He couldn't. And then Jordan said those words. I'll do it. Jordan said I'll do it, with his voice shaking. I'll take your place. The fortune teller's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time she smiled, a sad, weaverly smile. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you. She reached out and took his hands in hers, her touch as cold as ice. You have given me a gift I can never repay. As soon as the words left her lips, Jordan felt the change begin. The change was beginning. The air around him grew heavily, the shadows in the tent lingering, twisting around him like vines. His body felt weightless, as if he was floating, drifting away from himself. He could feel the circus power seeping into him, filling him with its ancient dark magic. The fortune teller began to fade from her, dissolving into the shadows. Goodbye, Jordan, she said, her voice echoing in the darkness. And I'm sorry. With that, she was gone, and Jordan was left alone in the tent, the candle flickering weakly on the table. The silence of the circus pressed him more oppressive than ever before. He could feel it now, the truth, what he had become. He was the new guardian, the keeper of the silent circus, bound to its endless, eerie cycle. The tent flopped, rustled, and Jordan knew that the circus was already preparing for its next visitor, its next victim. The attractions outside were waiting, hungry for the souls of the lost and forgotten. And Jordan, now the keeper of the circus, keeper of the secrets, would be there to greet them. The next morning, the people of Eldridge woke up to find fields empty once more. The circus gone, as mysteriously as it had appeared. They went about their day, unaware of the new guardian who watched over the silent circus, waiting for its next soul, waiting for its next victim, waiting for its next soul to wander into its grasp. And deeper into the shadows, Jordan stood, his existence now tied to the circus, waiting for the cycles to begin again. The circus takes souls. Which brings us to our next haunting tale. I would like to begin this next tale by thanking everybody who is in the chat, all of you frightful watchers. Prepare to enter the darkness. Prepare to enter. Prepare to enter. The candle in the window. In the quiet fog-bound village of Ashbourne, where the moors stretched endlessly beneath a perpetually gray sky, there was an old desolate manor, perched at the very edge of this sprawling, barren land. The manor had stood for centuries, its once grand walls now crumbling, its windows darkened by the time and neglect, except for one in a single window. On the upper floor, a candle burned every night, its flickering light visible from the village. The villagers spoke of the candle with a mixture of awe and fear, for it was said to be the beacon for lost souls, guiding them to the manor where they could find peace. But those who ventured to the manor often did not return, usually never return. And the stories that come back were enough to keep most people away. Kevin had always been fascinated by the manor and the mysterious candle, an orphan boy who had grown up on the outskirts of Ashbourne. Kevin had no family to call his own, and the village had never truly felt like home. He often wandered the moors, finding solace in its solitude, and from a young age he had been drawn to the flickering light in the distant manor. It was a strange comfort, that lonely candle burning night after night after night after night after night in a house that was otherwise dark and abandoned. The other villagers wanted him to stay, telling tales of those who had been lured by the candle's light, only to disappear in the manor's shadowy depths. But Kevin couldn't shake that feeling. That candle was calling to him, calling to him, calling to him, that it was somehow meant for him, meant for him. The thought gnawed at him, filling him with an insustainable curiosity. And then it happened. One cold, foggy night, when the village was quiet and the fog lay thick on the ground, Kevin decided he couldn't wait no longer. He wrapped himself in his tattered coat, slipped out onto the small room he called home, and began the long walk across the moors towards the manor. The path was treacherous, the fog so dense that it seemed to swallow the world around him, but the candle's light flickered in the distance, guiding his steps. As he neared the manor, the fog seemed to thicken, by the air growing colder and colder and colder and colder and colder with each step. The silence was oppressive, broken by only the distant sound of the wind howling through the moors. Kevin could feel an eerie presence watching him, a sensation that sent shivers down his spine. But he pressed on, determined to uncover the truth behind the candle. The moor loomed before him, its stone walls dark and forbidden, the windows staring out like empty eyes. But there, in the upper window, the candle burned brightly, its flame unwavering despite the chill in the air. Kevin hesitated for only a moment before pushing open the creaking front door and stepping inside. The interior of the manor was just as desolate as he had imagined. The walls were bare, the floors covered in dust, and the air was thick with the small burning wax. The candle in the window cast long flickering shadows across the room, but the rest of the house was shrouded in darkness. The cold seeping into his bones, Kevin took a deep breath and began to explore the manor, his footsteps echoing off the walls. The silence was unnerving, the darkness pressing in on him from all sides as he moved from room to room. He began to see things, shadow figures that seemed to fill out at the corners of his vision. Now, at first, he thought it was just his imagination, tricks of the light, tricks from the fog on his mind, playing tricks on him. But no, as he ventured deeper into the manor, the figures became more distinct, more real. They were the lost souls of the villagers. They were the lost souls the villagers had spoken about, drawn to the candle's light, but now trapped within the manor's walls, trapped within the manor's walls to forever be kept. Their faces were gnawed and pale, their eyes hollow and full of despair. They watched him silently, their forms barely more than wisps of smoke, as if they were barely clinging to existence. The sight of them filled Kevin with a deep sense of unease, but he couldn't turn back now. It was too late. He had to face the source of the candle's light, to uncover, understand what power it held. At last he found his way to the upper floor where the candle burned in the window. The room was small and sparsely furnished, dominated by a single table on which the candle rested. The flame was unnaturally bright, casting an eerie glow over the room, but as Kevin approached, he felt a wave of dread wash over him. The candle was no beacon of hope, it was a trap. As the realization hit him, the shadows in the room seemed to close in, the lost souls pressing closer, pressing closer, pressing closer, their whispers growing louder and louder and louder and louder and louder. They were not at peace. They were prisoners bound to the manor by the same light that had drawn them there. The candle's flame was a lure, a false promise that had led them to their doom, and now it had ensnared him as well. It had now captured him as well. And Kevin felt a cold hand brush against his cheek, the touch of one of the lost souls, and he recoiled in horror. He recoiled in horror, and he had to get out. He had to escape. He had to escape before it was too late. Desperate, he reached for the candle, intending to snuff out the flame, to break the spell that had the manor in its grips. But as his fingers closed around the base of the candle, he felt a searing pain shoot through his hand. The flame flared up bright, blinding, and Kevin screamed as the heat coursed through him, burning not his flesh but his very soul. The room seemed to spin, the shadows dancing around him, the whispers rising to a fever pitch. Too late, the voices hissed. Too late, too late, too late, too late. Too late. Kevin tried to pull away to extinguish the flame, but the candle's light had taken hold of him. He could feel it pulling him in, binding him to the manor, to the darkness that dwelled within. The shadows laughed as his vision blurred, the world fading away, as the light consumed him, as the light took his very soul. When the last of the wax melted away, the flame flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. But the candle's work was done. Kevin was gone, his soul bound to the manor, his body lost to the shadows. The next night, as the fog rolled in and the village seemed to settle into uneasy sleep, the candle in the window burned once again. Once more, its light flickered into the distance, a beacon for the lost, a false hope for those who wandered the manor in search of something more. And deep within the desolate manor, the shadows whispered of a new keeper for the candle. A boy who had sought the truth and found only darkness, his fate sealed by the light that had once called him. The villagers of Ashbourne continued to tell the story of the candle in the window, warning their children to stay away, stay away, stay away from the manor at the edge of the manor. But the candle burned night after night, waiting for the next soul to be drawn to its light, to be consumed by the darkness that had claimed so many before. Do you dare to go near the manor and see for yourself if this legend, if this tale is true? I want to say hello to all my frightful fans watching around the world, to all my frightful fans in the chat room. You are watching Dr. Fright as we count down to the most chilling, frightful tale of them all. Soon you'll be able to buy Fright Files t-shirts. Let's move on to the next frightful tale. I call this the Midnight Train. In a small fog-drenched town of Hollow Creek, where the nights were long and the mornings slow to rise, there was an old legend that sent shivers down the spines of even the bravest souls. It was the story of the Midnight Train. An ancient rusted locomotive that apparently only at the strike of midnight appears. The townsfolk whispered of the train's ghostly passengers, souls of those who have died in terrible accidents many years ago, forever trapped between the world and the next, searching in vain for a way to reach the afterlife. Daniel had always been fascinated by trains. The clickery clock of wheels on the tracks, the hiss of the steam, the shrillest cry of the whistle. These were sounds that filled him with a sense of wonder and excitement. But even more than that, Daniel loved a good ghost story. And when he heard about the midnight train, A thrill of anticipation tingled in his chest. The other children in town were too afraid to even speak of the train. But Daniel was different. He wanted to see for himself. He wanted to see it for himself to find out if the stories were true. Now you see, it was a cold, foggy night, with the mist hanging thick in the air like a ghostly shroud, that Daniel decided to put his plan into action. His parents had long since gone to bed, and the town was quiet, the streets deserted. Daniel crept out of his house, carefully not to make a sound, and make his way through the fog towards the old abandoned station at the edge of town. The station had once been a bustling hub of activity, but now it stood in its ruins, its roof covered and its platform overgrown with weeds. The air was damp and heavy, the fog swirling around Daniel's legs as he walked around the platform. He could barely see a few feet in front of him, the fog so thick it seemed to swallow up the world. But Daniel wasn't afraid. No, he was determined to see the midnight train, to prove to himself that the stories were just that, just simply stories. As the clock in the town square struck midnight, Daniel's heart skipped a beat. The night was eerie silent, the fog hanging in the air like a living thing. And then, faint at first, but growing louder, he heard it. He could hear it, the distant sound of a train whistle, a mournful, ghostly wail that sent chills down his spine. A moment later, the screeching of metal on metal piercing in the night as the train pulled into the station. Its arrival heralded by a rush of cold air that seemed to come from nowhere. The train was just as the stories had described, old and decayed. Its once bright colors faded and peeling its windows, cracked and covered in grime. The engine hissed and sputtered, the metal groaning as it uttered a great weight. The door slid open with a slow, mourning hiss, revealing a dark, silent interior. Daniel hesitated, his heart pounding in his chest. The train seemed to call to him, a low, instant pull that he couldn't resist. He took a deep breath and stepped inside, the doors closing behind him with a final echoing clang. The interior of the train was cold and silent, the air thick with scent of dusty and decay. The seats were covered in a fine layer of grime, the fabric torn and faded. The train began to move its wheels, clattering over the tracks, and Daniel felt a strange sense of unease settle over him. He looked around, and for the first time he noticed the other passengers. They were ghostly figures, pale and transparent, their eyes hollow and vacant, their faces devoid of emotion. They sat in the seats around him, their bodies still, gaze fixed on the floor. As the train picked up speed, hurtling through the foggy night, the ghosts began to stir. Their heads turned slowly towards Daniel, their eyes locking onto him with a chilling intensity. They whispered in unison, their voices soft and echoing like the rust of leaves in the wind. Help us! Help us find peace! Help! Daniel's heart raced as he realized the true nature of the train. It was not just a ghostly relic. It was a vessel carrying the souls of the dead forever, trapped in an endless loop, trapped in an endless loop, unable to reach their final destination. The train was cursed, doomed to ride the tracks for all eternity. Its passengers lost between worlds, searching for a way to move on. Panic gripped Daniel as the whispers grew louder and louder and louder and louder and louder and louder and more intense. The ghosts moved closer, their hollow eyes filled with desperation and sorrow. He wanted to scream. He wanted to jump from the train and run and run and run, but his body was frozen, his feet rooted to the floor. The train hurled through the darkness, the scenery outside a blur of shadows and fog. The station's light fading into the distance. As the train sped on, Daniel realized with a growing sense of dread that he had sealed his fate. He had sealed his fate forever by boarding the midnight train. He had become one of its passengers, bound to ride the tracks for all eternity, just like the ghost who now surrounded him. Now, the last thing Daniel saw was a faint light at the station, disappearing into the distance before the train vanished into the fog, leaving no trace behind. The next morning, the platform was empty, shrouded in mist, with no signs of the train or the boy who had dared to board it. Now, the villagers searched for Daniel, but he was never to be seen again. The legend of the midnight train grew stronger after that night, a curiosity, a cautionary tale for those who might be tempted to venture to the old station at midnight. The train still rides the tracks, its ghostly whistle echoing through the night, carrying the souls of the lost forever, searching for peace they will never find. The midnight train awaits. You are a fan of Dr. Fright, and you are about to enter a tale so horrifying. I must dedicate this upcoming tale to my best friend Rachel. But before we begin, I want everybody to ask themselves, what would you do? And keep that in mind as we grow deeper into this next tale. The creeping fog. In the coastal village of Grimsby, the sea mist was more than just a weathered phenomenon. It was a living entity, feared and revealed by townspeople. The fog rolled into thick and heavy, blanketing the village in a damp, impenetrable shroud. The villagers told the stories of the creeping fog, how it swallowed people whole, dragging them into the cold, unforgiving sea, never to return. It was said that the fog was alive, a sentient force that sought out those who wandered too close to the cliffs, luring them into their doom. You see, Lydia, had always been fascinated by the sea and the mysterious fog that seemed to breathe with a life of its own. A girl who only 16 with a love for adventure and a streak of stubbornness, Lydia often found herself down to the cliffs that overlooked the churning waters below. She would stand at the edge watching the waves crash against the rocks, feeling the salt spray on her face and listening to the distant, mournful call of the foghorn. Her parents had warned her countless times about the dangers. Her parents had warned her countless times, do not go. It is far too dangerous. But Lydia had never believed the old stories, never believed them for a second. To her, they were just tales, meant to be scared, meant to scare little children and keep them away from the cliffs. But the more she heard about the creeping fog, the more intrigued she became. What was it about the mist that filled the villagers with such a dread? Why did they avoid it at all costs, as if it was a living, breathing monster? And then it happened. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, and the first tendrils of the mist began to curl in the sea, Lydia decided to go find out for herself. She slipped out of the house and made her way to the cliffs, the fog, the fog already starting to thicken around her. The air was cold and damp, the mist wrapping around her like a wet blanket. The village behind her disappeared into the fog, leaving her alone on the narrow path that led to the edge of the cliffs. As she walked, Lydia noticed something strange. The fog seemed to be moving with a purpose, curling around her legs and pulling her towards the edge. The sea below roared with an unnatural fury, the waves crashing against the rocks with a sound that echoed through the mist. The fog grew thicker, 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 and more denser until Lydia could barely see a few feet in front of her. It was as if the world had been swallowed by the mist, leaving her in a cold, silent void. And then she heard it, a faint melodic humming coming from the fog. The sound was soft at first, barely audible over the roar of the sea, but it grew louder and more instant, as if calling out to her. Lydia's heart pounded in her chest, a strange mixture of fear and curiosity driving her forward. The humming seemed to wrap around her, pulling her deeper into the mist, guiding her steps as if by unseen hands. Lydia followed the sound, her feet moving as if of their own accord, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. The fog pressed around her. The fog pressed in around her, cold tendrils wrapping around her arms and legs, pulling her close to the edge of the cliff. The humming grew louder, the humming grew louder and more urgent, filling her ears with a haunting, otherworldly melody. And then she saw them, shadowy figures moving in the mist, their forms barely visible through the thick fog. They drifted towards her, their arms outstretched, beckoning her to join them. Their faces were twisted and inhuman, their eyes dark voids that reflected the endless depths of the sea. The fog pulling her at dragging her close to the edge, the fog dragging her closer and closer to the edge, the fingers in the mist growing closer to the each step. Lydia tried to resist, her heart pounding in her chest, but the fog was too strong. It wrapped around her cold and relentless, pulling her towards the edge of the cliff. The figures in the mist were closer now, their faces twisted with grotesque smiles, their eyes empty and lifeless. Lydia's mind seemed Lydia's mind screamed at her to turn back to run, but the body refused to obey. The edge of the cliff loomed before her, the sea churning and roaming below. The fog enveloped her, cold and suffocating, pulling her over the edge, into the void, into the void, into the void. And the last thing Lydia saw was the twisted, inhuman faces of figures in the mist, their eyes reflecting the darkness of the sea before she plunged into the cold, unforgiving waters below. The next morning, the villagers found nothing but a trail of footprints leading to the edge of the cliff, disappearing into the mist. Lydia was gone, swallowed by the creeping fog that had claimed so many before her. The villagers whispered her name. Lydia! Lydia! Their voices tinged with sorrow and fear, but they knew there was no hope of finding her. They knew there was no hope. The fog had taken her just as it had taken others before her, and it would take others again, again, and again. The fog rolled back out to the sea, its hunger sated for now, but always waiting, always watching for the next soul to wander too close to the edge. The story of Lydia, the girl who defied the fog, became another cautionary tale told to keep to the children of the villages away from the cliffs. But the fog, with its haunting melody and twisted shadows, remained a living, breathing force that could never be tamed. The fog waits for its next victim. And as we count down to the most frightful tale of them all, I want to thank all the brave souls who are here and have made it this far in our tales of frightfulness. But if you must leave before the next tale, I will understand. But if you are still here, ready to plunge into the next horrifying tale, then brace yourself as we go even deeper into the depths of the unknown. Prepare yourself for the headless horseman. This tale sets back into the villages of the Black Hollow, nestled deep within a valley surrounded by dark ancient worlds and woods. Before we continue with that tale, I want to thank everybody for coming here tonight to watch the Fright Files. Unfortunately, my fellow fans of Dr. Fright, we must cut this episode short into two parts. You will hear the final tales of the Headless Horseman and the next two tales this coming Friday on our next episode. As for now, we must end this episode, as Dr. Fright must go back into his hollow depths of hell.